Hello again, Roy.RealEstate here with Coldwell Banker Legacy in San Angelo. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about the appraisal process and kind of the purposes of it. And I've covered appraisals a little bit before, just want to kind of take a little bit different point of view on it. So as you go through the process, before the house is listed, the agent sits down with the sellers and the agent comes up with sort of a price range that they think is appropriate for the house. And then when the buyer's are ready to make an offer, the buyer's agent should at least go do the same thing. Then we'll look at some of the comparable sales in the area, figure out what other houses have sold for, and try to say, hey, yeah, this is a price range for a house. But we nearly always deal with a price range, whatever. We think this house is between 200 and 220. It's hard to get that precise and stuff like that. So both of those have done, but both of them, one of them is working for the seller, the other one's working for the buyer. So what happens is when you get down to the lender, in order to protect their interest, because they're going to loan whatever $200,000 on this house, they want to verify that that house is worth $200,000 in today's market in San Angelo, Texas. And they do that for a reason. It's to lower their risk if they have to foreclose on that house sometime in the future. They want to know that at least as of today, the house was worth $200,000. They can't necessarily, no one can predict what it's going to be like when they have to foreclose on it in 2 or 5 or 10 or 15 years, but at least as of today, that it was worth that amount. So they hire a disinterested third party to come out and do an appraisal on it. Now the fun part about appraisal is they have to come up with an exact dollar amount that they think the house is worth. So they do a little bit more, or substantially more in some cases, in-depth analysis than what the real estate agent does. Because again, we're trying to come up with a price range, and it's just basically going to see what the market price for that house is. But when the appraiser's doing it, they have to be more precise. The lender forces them to be very precise on some things, the adjustments they make for more square footage, for a swimming pool, for more acres, for age of the house, all these things. They have to make adjustments for all those and come up with a price that, yes, we think the value of this house is or is not $200,000. And that's a very in-depth look at it. But it's hard to tell, particularly when the market is moving as prices are going up. It's even more and more difficult for them to say, okay, on today's market, because they're always looking at the past. They're looking at those past sales in the past few months. And, depending on how fast the market's moving, they can expand or contract that age range that they're looking at. But they're looking at those recent past sales and saying, yeah, here is what houses as similar to this are selling for. The other thing is, we've talked about it before, no two houses are exactly alike. Even if they were cookie cutter houses built next door to each other with the same floor plan on the same street, there's going to be differences just in a few years in the landscaping, the condition on the inside of it, someone's decorations, the color schemes. There's all these different factors, and it gets difficult to figure all that in. But the appraiser basically is in their position for working for the lender. They have the ability to say, no, you cannot purchase this house at $200,000 because I think that this house is only worth $190,000 based on these pieces of data. And so depending on the type of appraisal it is, and sometimes there's some things we can do to work with them to get that adjusted a little bit, that I can provide them data or the other agent can provide them data that enables them to say, oh yes, with that additional data I wasn't aware of, we can adjust this appraisal up to the $200,000 or whatever the contract price is what they're trying to get to. But it's difficult to do that. It doesn't work most of the time because these appraisers are professionals, and they go through very thoroughly and pick out all this data, and they use good data, and they're very thorough. Again, they're humans. They miss things. Some are more thorough than others. So that's kind of how that process works. But again, it's there for a reason, even though when it comes right down to it, if you have a buyer and a seller that are both happy with the price that they're paying for this house, it's like, well, what business is it of anybody else to say what our house is worth? But it is, because they're going to loan you the money on it. The good news is, if you go with the cash deal, you pay cash for your house, you don't have to worry about an appraisal. It's whatever the buyer and the seller are good with at that point. Whatever price they agree on is what that home is worth. So anyway, it's an interesting process, and it's a third party, but it's a third party for a reason. And they're going through and trying to determine that things are reasonable here, so that in the event that lender has to foreclose on that house and take it back, that hopefully that they can sell it for reasonably close to what they have into it. There's always going to be some loss because a foreclosure will generally sell for a substantial amount less, particularly if there's damage to the home if it's not been well taken care of. But they're trying to come up with that number to protect the lender, and that's the goal of it. And it's an important goal. It's valid. It's just sometimes when it's you in the middle of it, and the appraiser says your house, if you're buying or selling, it doesn't matter. Your house that you've agreed to buy or sell for $200,000, they say it's worth $190,000. It's a little bit frustrating experience. But again, they go through it, they do the best they can with the data, and there are times that the agents can provide additional data to help them change those numbers, but generally that's going to be a pretty much of a limiting factor on us. We've got to provide them really good data that enables them to change their position, or that amount is going to stick, at least in the short term. So a little bit more about appraisals. If you've got any questions, give me a call, Roy.RealEstate, 325-268-0775. Thank you.